Hello and welcome to the semifinals of the World Championship in Through the Ages. I'm sadly already out of the tournament. I got eliminated in stage 5, but now the World Championship has of course progressed also without me, and we are already now at stage 7 of the World Championship. It's the second last one, and with that we are at the semifinals. You can see that there are 12 players who are playing in the semifinals. However, there's a 13th player, A440, who is already qualified for the finals, and those 12 players are divided into groups of 4, and the winner of each group will make it to the finals. So, very exciting. Only the best of the best are left, and we will be taking look now at a game of Group 1, a 4-player game with all group participants involved, and we will quickly take a look at the rating of all of those players. And the 4 players of this group are Plunderteig, Mortapecheur, Palino, and Eepogi. Mortapecheur is, of course, the reigning world champion who is trying to defend his title, also the winner of a couple of Intermezzo championship seasons, so already with some big tournament wins. Palino, a player who has been playing the game for quite a while, also in tournaments, is always on the top in the transcontinental ladder, is very successful there, and also so far in the World Championship has been performing very well. We have Eepogi, who you of course have seen in the latest Intermezzo Championship season, where he finished at the second position at the end. Also a player who has improved, I think, over the last or since the last year, and has been playing on a very high level, has also made it to the semifinals of the World Championship. And then we have Plunderteig, and there's a little bit of an interesting backstory behind it, because Plunderteig, when he entered the World Championship, wasn't really a known player, but he performed very well in the early stages, and that also got visible then in the click rating, where he got a very high estimated rating. Now he also has already a very high conservative rating, but we saw it especially in the estimated rating, and there was, because of that, also some debate ongoing about the click rating system and all. And yeah, now before the semifinals, there was a reveal, and that reveal is that Plunderteig is actually the player Sandhippo playing with a different account. And first of all, it has to be said that Sandhippo asked Payada, the tournament organizer, if it would be fine if he is playing on with a different account. The thing is, Sandhippo is a very well-known player. However, he is a bit of a two-player specialist and hasn't been really playing in tournaments with 3 and 4-player games involved. And so he just wanted to tried out playing the World Championship, and wanted then to play with a different profile and asked Payada, so everything fine from that. Nonetheless, of course, it sparked a little bit of discussion on how it is, maybe some known players playing with different accounts, and I don't want to delve into that, but yeah. Plunderteig is Sandhippo, a very, very strong two-player who so far in the tournament has also put out some very great results in 3 and 4-player games, as we can see in the very high rating that is reflected under the Plunderteig account. Alright, so that was a very short introduction of the players, and now let's hop right into the game. I think it's actually the first time that I cover a game on my channel where I wasn't involved, and of course I had to think about how exactly I want to do it, because I think there are 2 different ways on how I could approach this. Either I could watch the game without knowing the result, without having taken any look at it yet, or I could analyze the game beforehand and then record the video with already having seen the moves and maybe noticed some things. Then maybe I can give you a little bit more of a deep dive. However, if you don't have seen the game yet, then of course you can maybe experience my surprise about certain moves, and also about the end result, of course, that I don't know yet. And so with that, as you heard right now, I have decided to go with the first option, with not having taken a look at the game yet. That for me has of course also the advantage that it takes a bit less time, meaning that it's maybe a bit more easily possible for me to also cover some more games without it being too much of a time investment for me. But at the end of the video you can maybe give me some feedback on whether you like the approach that I'm choosing now of not knowing the end result and not having taken a look at a game yet, or if you would prefer it if I do some analysis beforehand to maybe be able to go a little bit deeper into some decisions of the players. With having now chosen the way of not knowing the end result and not having taken a look at the game yet, of course, when I maybe now during the game will criticize a player's move or will or say that it looks a little bit weird, then of course be very aware that we have some top players who invested probably a lot more time into their moves than when I now just take a quick look at them. So most of the times when I'm saying something like this, probably there's a very good reason behind this. Nonetheless, if something looks a little bit odd to me, I will still voice it, but be aware that probably there is a good reason behind it that I'm just not seeing with taking a look at the move just for the first time now. Alright, now with all that being said, let's start with taking a look at the game and maybe very quickly a look at the leaders and wonders that are in the game. And it's actually also the first time that I take a look at those now, so we can see some theater synergy with Chaplin and Marlene, but there's no Hollywood. There is the internet, no Pierre, but there's Bill Gates, Steve Jobs for some lab synergy. We have Churchill and Gandhi for the military, no Manhattan Project. There's the space flight for some science synergy. We have the Red Cross. In H2, Ocean Liner and Suez Canal are missing, as well as the Harvard College, so some strong wonders are out. We have some culture leaders with Anthony Gaudi and Shakespeare, as well as Darwin. We have Nobel and Newton as some science leaders, Napoleon and Catherine as some military action leaders. In H1 we have Jan Žižka and Joan of Arc as military action leaders, Nostradamus to help with the strength. We have Isabella as a colonization leader, but there's no big colonization payoff in H2. We have Michelangelo together with St. Peter's Basilica. We have Saladin as a very solid leader, and also Leonardo for some lab and printing press synergy. We have both Silk Road and Universitas. We have the Medici Castle and St. Peter's Basilica and the Forbidden City, so both of the Happy Face solution wonders. Alright, Plunderteig is in first position and he takes Sun Tzu, which I think seems to be the best pick with there only being yellow cards as an alternative. Now it will be interesting to see whether Eepogi will respond with taking Hammurabi despite playing behind Sun Tzu, or if he will go with maybe taking Engineering Genius or Cleopatra. He is still willing to go for Hammurabi, so isn't afraid of that. Palino has now the option of taking maybe Cleopatra together with the yellow card. Instead goes with the Engineering Genius, hopes to maybe get a leader from the remaining ones. A lot of cards from the row have already been taken. And now it's Mortar's turn, and he will go with the Stonehenge and the Ridgeland, which seems to be a good pick. Takes the Stonehenge over the Rome Roads. In the 4-player games, I like the Rome Roads quite a bit, but Stonehenge, of course, also a very solid wonder, and he also doesn't go for Cleo. Maybe it's a bit of a risk, of course, taking her without knowing for certain what wonder you will be getting at the end. Then we are at H1 and it's Plunderteig's turn. He will go for Sun Tzu. The Rome Roads builds a mine, increases his population. Nothing special here. Rome Roads, as said, a wonder that I quite like in 4-player games. Then we have Eepogi. He goes for Hammurabi, builds a mine. And he doesn't go for the Acropolis here. Instead, he grabs this monarchy for 3 civil actions. And I do think with Hammurabi that can be a good choice. Potentially can maybe even do a revolution already at the next turn. Or maybe at the next turn build a lab and maybe take a wonder and then do the monarchy revolution in 2 turns. But yeah, an interesting pick. But I think it's just so strong to get an early monarchy revolution with Hammurabi that it definitely might be worth it in this situation. Now it's Palino's turn. He will now go for Cleopatra, elects her, builds the second lab, takes the Acropolis, and with having had the urban growth, can easily now at the next turn build the first step, maybe still get the third mine going, and can build that wonder very cheaply. Montar is also willing to take a card for 3 civil actions, and he actually goes for the iron here, which is interesting because it means that he isn't taking any of those HA leaders. However, there might be the chance that he still gets Alex or maybe even Aristotle at the next turn, and especially for Alex, it's maybe not too bad if you get him a little bit later, as you probably want to use him for the quick yellow token most of the times anyway. So he could still go for Alex, but of course then with having Alex, the Stonehenge, and having taken the Iron for 3, it's a big civil action investment. He has some additional signs from the Stonehenge, so with that he can easily get into Iron, but still an expensive pick at the end. And I'm not sure if I would have gone for it, but with the Stonehenge and the additional signs, having an early Iron can just be very strong. Plunderteig seeds and the development of crafts are revealed. He will just finish the Rome roads. I think his turns so far have been relatively straightforward, and now he will just use the civil actions effectively and get the additional production of the Rome roads going. Eepogi will indeed do already the monarchy revolution. Will he build a warrior to get out of corruption? Yes, he will do that. That might mean that he can't build a second lab at the next turn if he doesn't get any additional population or food. Palino will go for increasing his population, builds a mine, builds a step of the Acropolis, and then interestingly takes the frugality. Could have, of course, finished the Acropolis, but then he doesn't have another opportunity to use Cleo's resources at the next turn. Could have increased his population, but then he goes into consumption very early, so at the end he's fine with investing that civil action to basically for two food with not going into consumption and for the 1 food of the frugality. He has no free population with the Acropolis. Of course, it can be maybe even more important to get something like the free religion. Martin has now still the chance to go for leader. There are even both Aristotle and Alex still available for him, and even though he has already taken a technology, he still values Aristotle more highly here, goes for the second lab, elects Aristotle, and the technologies that he will be taking from now on will be giving him 1 additional science. Plunderteig seeds the second event into the deck, the development of science is revealed. He will now build a second lab, increases his population, and takes the swordsman for 2 civil actions. Maybe he has already drawn some aggressive cards, or maybe put some strength events into the deck. That could explain his 2 civil action swordsman pick, but of course generally it's good to have a military technology available in 4-player games. Eepogi now goes for a relatively late Colosseum. He has already the 3rd military action from the monarchy, so I think it could also be an idea to maybe wait for Silk Road, Universitas, maybe Forbidden City, but of course the Happy Face and even another military action and the science discounts can still be fine. Also it makes it that he can invest his resources. He didn't have the Happy Faces and enough population to build a second lab this turn, so maybe he would have had some corruption issues if he wouldn't have gone for finishing the Colosseum here. Palino will this turn finish the Acropolis, will not use the Engineering Genius, maybe would have had corruption with that, still maybe has the chance to use that on an H1 wonder, and he will actually go for 1 immediately, the St. Peter's Basilica. With that he has even more opportunities to use Cleo's resources, and of course the Happy Faces can be quite useful at some point. Now it's Mortar's turn. He can, thanks to the development of science, just go for the Iron without building a step of the Stonehenge and without grabbing a tech, without needing, and here, thanks to the rich land, has just enough resources to go for 2 upgrades, takes the Warfare with his last civil action to spend, to get a science with Aristotle, and it's just also quite nice to have the opportunity or the option to get a military action going. Plunderteig seeds again, if I am not mistaken. He's the only one who has seeded any events in there yet. And interestingly, despite already having taken the swordsman for 2, he is now also willing to take the knights for 2. Maybe he has drawn a tactic for them. It really is looking like he is putting some strength events in there. And with the remaining 2 civil actions, he will actually develop the knights already, builds 1, increases his population, reveals the medieval army tactic, and with that is already applying some pressure on all of his opponents. And now we can of course see that Eepogi's Colosseum and the 4th military action that he got thanks to that is quite helpful for him. Even with being on 2 strength, he is completely safe from an aggression. He will now put the first non-Plunderteig event into the deck, opens the development of settlement, and is again willing to Yeah, go for a bit of an expensive pick here. Goes for the Alchemy, but of course with having Monarchy and Hammurabi has a lot of civil actions. Maybe didn't like the cards that are available for cheaper. Could have gone maybe into Printing Press, but I mean there is some synergy, but playing against Sun Tzu and then going into Printing Press of course is quite a bit greedy. So instead he goes for the Alchemy, and of course there's Leonardo available for one civil action, which he can now transition into. And thanks to the one resource that he is now getting from Leonardo, he is actually able to build a lab directly, and that is of course a big jump in science, and with that I think it is understandable that he was willing to reach out that heavily for that alchemy. Also allows him to use that second urban growth in the near future. Copies to the, or reveals, no I think copies to the fighting band tactic, is now at 3 strength. Palino has the Acropolis, has a third lab actually, maybe he built that with the development of Civil Life, and with that can develop the monarchy with a 3 science discount, is using Cleo's resources with building a step of the St. Peter's Basilica, and then actually builds another step with the Engineering Genius. Could have increased his population, but if he wouldn't have used the frugality, then that alone wouldn't have been enough to get out of corruption. Also with being on 3 military actions now, thanks to the monarchy, he might be safe from an aggression, so maybe the monarchy was also a bit of one of the reasons might have been to be more easily able to defend against potential aggressions from Plunderteig. Then Martin Becher is willing to take the knights for 3 civil actions. It is expensive, but now that Plunderteig has committed, it's very likely that that will be the tactic that will be upgraded, and then of course it's just very important being able to copy that at some point. He has had taken a warfare the turn before, he has now developed it, maybe with the development of Civil Life, and thanks to that is also somewhat safe from an aggression. All of the opponents of Plunderteig have an additional military action, and now he's building an additional warrior going up to 3 strength and also getting out of corruption. Plunderteig again seeds the development of religion is revealed. Palino might potentially be happy to see that with the St. Peter's Basilica, even though now Joan of Arc, which would have made that free religion even greater, is taken by Plunderteig, maybe to apply even more military pressure. With the free religion, he's now going up to 7 strength, and he has actually enough population to go for another army. Is now at 13 strength. Now it will be very interesting to see if all of the opponents can respond to that, or if there will be maybe an aggression happening at Plunderteig's next turn. Also, he's taken the iron and the ridgeland to maybe start some production at the next turn. Eepogi is seeds, meaning that the next event deck will consist out of 4 events from Plunderteig and 2 from Eepogi, while Palino and Martin haven't put any event in there. Eepogi takes the free religion, will increase his population, and now it's interesting to see, will he grab the knights for 3 civil actions, and he won't. I'm not sure if he maybe could have taken them, developed them, and built one or something, but instead he is just going for some warriors and is actually still taking the knights. So that seems to be an interesting choice. I'm not sure if he would have developed them, he could have increased his population only once, and then, no, still interesting. Soon this copy will be available. This tactic will be available to copy, so an interesting choice here, taking the knights, but instead going for a bunch of warriors. If he has now 3 defense cards in hand, then he can actually defend, so maybe he just wanted to get as much strength this turn as possible to make sure he can defend against an aggression, or maybe at least wanted to threaten defending against an aggression, which can already be enough to maybe make it that Plunderteig will choose a different target. Now it's Palino's turn. He will finish the St. Peter's Basilica and is willing to take Jan Žižka for 3 civil actions, who will help him defending and also taking him away from Martin, who then maybe could have been also a bit more aggressive. He will then build a warrior, copies the fighting band tactic, is at 5 strength, but he would need 4 defense cards to actually be able to defend. Martin will take the free religion, goes for an upgrade, builds a step of the Stonehenge, develops the knights, builds one, and actually adopts to the fighting band tactic. He would now need 3 defense cards, and of course, with actually being willing to spend the 2 military actions to adopt a tactic, he is sending some signs that he actually might have the defense cards, but of course it could also be a bluff. So now, after we have seen the response of all of the players, it will now be very interesting to see which will be the target of the aggression. As Palino will need the most defense cards, I could imagine that if Plunderteig has an aggression, it will target Palino. And let's see. There is an aggression, but it is actually directed against Martar, who will now lose one of his HA labs, and Plunderteig will gain some additional resources. An interesting choice. Maybe he counted how many cards everyone has drawn, has maybe drawn a bunch of defense cards himself, and had maybe knowledge that it will get through anyway. But yeah, he will now go for that raid against Martar. Has some additional resources and can now use them to actually, potentially could have even gone for 3 upgrades, only goes for 2 upgrades for now, and is rather wants to have this irrigation available. And in a military heavy game, getting some food production going quickly now definitely can be very important. Eepogi Seeds and Event Revealed is actually a colony, and Plunderteig is willing to bid quite a lot for that, which will of course take a little bit of pressure away from his opponents, but he has a relatively strong colony. Still, it's a bit of a price to pay, so I could have maybe also seen him keeping the military pressure, but if he hasn't any more aggressions anyway, then of course getting that colony is of course also quite nice, and when we take a look at the situation, we can see that he actually has enough population and resources to rebuild at his next turn, and he is also for the moment still the strongest. Eepogi has invested in the last turn into new warriors, but is now willing to disband them, going for Knight, copying the medieval army tactic, and with that being the strongest for now, also taking the Himeji Castle and the Engineering Genius to potentially get even more strength going. Palino will offer the Open Borders Agreement to Eepogi, so both of them actually have now 5 military actions. It's a military action heavy game, and no one is at 2 military actions. Palino will increase his population, builds a 3rd farm. At the next turn he will then have, thanks to the farm, enough food to increase his population again, and maybe then to build another warrior or maybe even swordsman. Takes the breakthrough in the iron. Martar will this turn finish the Stonehenge and takes the irrigation to score another science with Aristotle. Also builds another knight, copies the tactic, and is now by far the strongest. Maybe he could even pull an aggression off at the next turn. And then it's again Plunderteig's turn. He is not willing to see it. He knows, of course, what is on top with Joan of Arc. Maybe that could be a hint for a strength event, but maybe also just doesn't have any card that he would like to see it. He is going up to 13 strength again, upgrades his last mine, and then interestingly takes the cultural heritage, but I think he might be in a position where just every bit of additional science could be very valuable. So even though it's not the most efficient to take that for 2 and play it for 1, it could still be the right choice. And there was indeed a strength event on top. The foray is revealed now by Eepogi, and Martar and Plunderteig will get some additional food and resources out of it. Eepogi has a lot of science, has the monarchies, so getting a code of laws on top of that is just a nice improvement. He will then go for another upgrade using the urban growth before he will lose it to the end of the age and increases his population. Builds another knight, is now at 13 strength as well. The next turn he could have some uprising issues. I'm not sure if there's a copy of Theology left. Palino goes for Swordsman, takes the rich land, upgrades one, and then builds one. As said, he can increase his population thanks to having built a 3rd farm at the turn before. Is now at 9 strength and should be safe from any aggressions. Apart maybe from Eepogi, who he has the Open Borders Agreement with. Martar seeds, and there's another colony revealed this time. Martar can win the colony and is actually also willing to send an army away, which is interesting because we are just before the start of Age 2. I think in Age 2 that colony gets quite a bit more valuable. There's also no Suez Canal, no cook, so interesting that he is willing to pay that price. Especially, I guess, he can now take some food from the foray and can still rebuild, so yeah, he will now become the strongest maybe, so with that, that is maybe a fine decision at the end. And then he will now go for Michelangelo. He has some strong resource production. Still, he could have taken just some very solid leaders like Saladin or Nostradamus, but he is believing in the potential of Michelangelo here. So let's see what he will be able to pull off. Michelangelo definitely a leader that can just produce insane amounts of values, and with having that strong of a resource production and not having the greatest science production, going for wonders is what you want to do, and Michelangelo of course makes it a lot it's just even a lot easier to build a lot of wonders. He will now rebuild, is now at 15 strength and the strongest, develops the irrigation, maybe just to be civil action efficient, probably didn't want to have any of those cards like alchemy or theocracy in hand. Age 2 starts, Plunderteig doesn't see it, Builds another knight, takes the Forbidden City. It's probably good for him to get more civil actions. Universitas, maybe also an interesting pick, but then he would be very dependent on when the government farms will be available, while now he knows that soon he will be able to play in 5 civil actions regardless on when the government farms will be there. Eepogi actually tries an aggression against Palino. He can easily try one without missing out on any draws, and Palino has to sacrifice quite a bunch of cards plus a defense card. And as said, Eepogi might have some uprising issues, has to disband a warrior now, dropping down to 12 strength. He then builds an additional religion, which could be a hint that there is actually a rebellion coming, and then is actually willing to take Nobel here for 3. Interestingly though, he is still keeping Leonardo instead of getting the additional strength and science production from Nobel. The strength for the moment doesn't really matter that much. The science of course could be useful, but he has already some strong science production, so maybe the additional resources that he could generate at the next turn with Leonardo are at the moment more relevant than the additional science from Nobel. For example, if there's a coal available at the next turn, now with Leonardo you could develop it, play 1 reserves and go for 1 upgrade. With Nobel that wouldn't be possible. Palino this turn goes for a relatively late iron, but still of course can be nice to get some production going. He also wants to upgrade his monarchy with the Code of Laws to be on 6 and not only on 5 civil actions, and with his last civil action, or first of all, he will go for an upgrade, increasing his strength. He is of course the one who has not the upgraded medieval army tactic, is because of that the weakest, even though he has Jan Žižka, and of course he in this position might be afraid of some bad strength events coming. But he is now producing actually 7 culture per turn, so he might get a bit of a culture lead going here. Mortar seeds, and there is indeed a rebellion revealed, maybe seeded by Eepogi, who was actually willing to build a religion at his last turn, and with that no one gets hit by that. Mortar takes the Republic, can maybe do a revolution into it, takes the Universitas with Michelangelo and has 1 civil action left, which he will use to upgrade a farm to get a bit of food production going. He could have actually taken and finished the Universitas, but then of course he doesn't know when he has the next chance to get the Republic. He would give the Republic to Plunderteig, and so maybe he can at the next turn either finish the Universitas then, or maybe do a revolution and then have a lot of civil actions going in 2 turns. Plunderteig seeds and opens the Crusade, so there is a strength event, but maybe not the worst one for Palino. Plunderteig is able to win it. He will finish the Forbidden City, is now at 5 civil actions, and then takes the breakthrough, and getting some additional science might still be very valuable. Could have taken a selective breeding, but I think finishing the Forbidden City here is just too important. Eepogi takes the coal, and now it comes into play that he kept Leonardo actually. He can now score an additional resource thanks to Leonardo, plays the reserves, goes for an upgrade, and again, he is keeping Leonardo with the hopes of maybe generating some more resources. So it will be interesting to see when exactly he will choose to go for Nobel. He is willing to also miss out on the selective breeding, so interesting that the first copy is not that highly contested, but I think both of the players before had some important other things to do. Palino will now take it together with some yellow cards and also the first copy of cannons. Mortar seeds and opens the Raiders, which he's not part of. Palino and Eepogi will lose some food or resources. And he is indeed just doing a revolution this turn. Could have finished the Universitas, but with the revolution he is saving quite a lot of science, and with having that many civil actions he can easily finish the Universitas, go for some more wonders, and maybe build up something strong. He is actually willing to miss out on the cannons, also some strong yellow cards, so he is doing some sacrifices, but yeah, of course the revolution might just be very strong for him, because even if he now finishes Universitas and goes for Republic peacefully, he might be quite low in science, so the revolution is maybe necessary, and there will always be some cards that you maybe really need to take. Maybe there's also a chance that he has already drawn something like Classic Army. Plunderteig will go for the irrigation, doesn't know when the selective breeding will be available, will even build a 3rd farm, which allows him to increase his population again at the next turn. He could have also built a warrior to get more strength, but that maybe is a sign of him not having seeded any strength events. And the cards that have been put into the event deck are, a lot have been seeded by Red, who is Mortar, and then also 2 by Blue, Eepogi, and 1 H2 event by Plunderteig. He will now take the cannons that Mortar left for him. Eepogi will go for the strategy, develops it, scoring another resource with Leonardo, plays the reserves, and thanks to the additional resources that he got from Leonardo, again, he is able to go for the next upgrade. So far it has been yeah, some really strong decisions each time, or it paid off very well to keep Leonardo. Of course, this time he lost 2 resources to the Raiders, so if he hadn't had knowledge about that event, then maybe he couldn't have planned it exactly like that, but still, he had maybe a sense that at this point the resources from Leonardo are more valuable, but now he is making the switch. He has now also set up some strong resource production, and is going for a very interesting pick here. Goes for the scientific method for 2 civil actions. Let's see if that is maybe meant as a denial. Palino, of course, could very nicely go for some scientific method upgrades. There's Bill Gates at the end, so maybe it is a denial. Yeah, probably. So interesting that he is willing to go for the denial. Could have, for example, taken revolutionary idea and the reserves. But I mean, with Nobel, maybe there is even a case to further increase the science production and be well set up for Nobel Prizes. Still a very interesting pick. I'm not sure if I would have done the same, because in 4-player games, of course, you have to be careful with hate drafting. On the other hand, of course, it would be a strong improvement for Palino to be able to get those scientific methods going. Yeah, so definitely an interesting choice. Palino will play the reserves for food, can with that increase his population. I think he lost 2 food with the Raiders. Develops the cannons, builds one, has the fortifications tactic thanks to Jan Žižka. He has already 2 outdated one of those, is now at 16 strength, is not the weakest any longer, takes the revolutionary idea, the opera, and the patriotism. Mata seeds and opens the new deposits, and a very similar amount of resources is gained by everyone. Mata can now finish the Universitas, and I think now it's the time for him to take another wonder, so it will be interesting to see what he will pick. I maybe would go for the statue, but it could maybe also be an idea to go for the Eiffel Tower now and then go for another wonder the next turn, and one of those probably should still be available. The happy face of the Eiffel Tower might soon be relevant, so while the statue maybe could be the better pick, maybe with the idea of getting 2 wonders going quickly, the Eiffel Tower could end up being the better pick. So let's see what Mata at the end decided to go for. Often he surprises me with his moves, so maybe he will now just go for the Louvre. No, he will go for the statue, and yeah, I think that is probably the strongest wonder for him here, with the additional yellows, especially with the irrigation. He will actually not finish it, is actually willing to go for Napoleon. With the additional yellows, he could have quite some potential for the military. Also, he is now the strongest instead of the weakest, but it's of course a bit of a price to pay to go for not finishing the statue here. Probably will have corruption now. No. And of course, with now going for Napoleon, the plan of going for 2 more wonders is probably not the best one, and maybe it would have been a bit of overkill anyway. I think the statue is probably the strongest wonder for him here. He also takes the cavalryman, interestingly. He could have also gone for another farm upgrade, but maybe wants to have them available. Could have the hussars maybe, or maybe just wants to be prepared for H3 tactics, especially now that he likely will be missing out on the last copy of cannons. I think it should be the last one, so he, yeah, with that maybe just wants to make sure that he can make use out of H3 tactics more easily. Plunderteig goes for the justice system, no governments so far on the row for him. He is willing to invest some science into it, can of course make it a bit more difficult for him to get into a government form after having spent a lot of science into that, but also I think helped him to get out of corruption. And if he is able to get Newton going soon, then with either journalism or scientific method, then of course he will have a lot of science, and then soon will be able to get a government form going, and so far he has already a fine amount of civil military actions. Eepogi seeds and opens the reds. Mata losing 4 food, so not upgrading the farm at the end wasn't a bad call with the reds coming anyway. Eepogi this turn can finish the Imechi Castle, goes for another coal upgrade, takes the cannons, the frugality, and is actually going for the scientific method. Maybe wants to prepare for some Nobel Prizes. Normally for players that are starting the game to play the game, it's always a good advice to give to not upgrade from H1 to H2 buildings or mines or farms, but of course the top players know when maybe you can do an exception. I'm not 100% convinced if that is the right decision here, but I mean, yeah, with Nobel, there will be Nobel Prizes, there's Bill Gates, so it could very well be a good decision here at the end. Then it's Palino's turn, and he will offer an international trade agreement to Martin. And Palino gets additional resource production. He will now go for some additional food production, with upgrading 2, even 3 of his farms, which is interesting. Takes the organized religion, plays the revolutionary idea, isn't going for any of those leaders, meaning that only Antoni Gaudi will be left for him, but with having the opera in hand, Gaudi, of course, should be a very strong leader for him. Martin cedes and opens the barbarians. Palino will lose a population, that might be a bit hurtful for him. Martin goes for the architecture, finishes the statue, takes the team sports, the engineering genius, and the breakthrough. With the engineering genius, maybe it could be an idea to actually go for the gremlin at the next turn, so let's see if he plans on doing that. Plunderteig goes for the scientific method. He has taken Newton at the turn before, will elect him now, goes for the scientific method, goes for some upgrades, develops the swordsman for free, goes for an upgrade. At the first look, you might say, oh, he did a turn order mistake, he should have used a military action from Joan of Arc, but of course then he couldn't have developed the swordsman with Newton, so sadly he couldn't do both. He couldn't save the civil action and use the military action, and he made a decision to rather wanting to have the additional civil action, which he will now use to play the cultural heritage before he will lose it to the end of the age. And I mean, he has now a very strong economical setup. At the next turn can maybe get into a government form. I think there should still be a copy of constitutional monarchy left, and then he might be well set up for age 3. Might still need some ways to produce some culture though. Eepogi seeds in the pestilence is revealed. That might make it a bit annoying for Palino, because he will now actually lose 2 population at his next turn, but also Eepogi had to lose something. He lost an HA temple, will now take the selective breeding, develops it, goes for an upgrade, goes for another upgrade, and upgrades the first one of his alchemies to scientific method. Palino, let's see what he had lost. Maybe it was not too bad. I mean, it was bad, but at least he, when he now goes into the fortifications, doesn't really need those swordsmen, so he just lost 2 swordsmen. Builds another cannon, is now at 17 strength, and he's willing to take Antoni Gaudi for 3, which is of course expensive, but at the next turn he wouldn't have had Jan Žižka any longer, wouldn't have gotten the civil action back for replacing his leader, so it's basically only 1 civil action more expensive, and maybe he wants to be prepared at the next turn. There might be some important H3 cards, so having Gaudi already running now could be the right call here. And interestingly, he is willing to develop the warfare relatively late, but maybe just felt a bit safer with that, and also it will mean more draws in H3 if he starts or continues with building some cannons. Martin offers the scientific cooperation to Palino, so they have the double pact ongoing right now. That's of course a bit of a benefit for them. And let's see, Martin has 7 science saved up, 3 production, has a breakthrough in hand. Palino has actually the same amount of production and saved up science, has no breakthrough, but has a bunch of cheap tech, so it could turn out to be a relatively fair pact for both of them. Martin takes the rifleman with having missed out on the cannons, I think a very important technology for him. He develops them, takes the journalism, develops them as well, builds one, and gets more science production, which will also be useful for the pact, and of course increases his culture production. Now at the end of Martin's turn, as soon as the card row will be refreshing, H3 will start, so maybe a good point to take a look at the overview. And we can see that Palino, with having had Jan Žižka plus those wonders, has indeed created a bit of a culture lead. Martin is second best in culture. Eepogi and Plunderteig are a little bit behind. For Plunderteig, the Rome roads will now switch to culture production, so he has basically the same culture production as Eepogi. Then economically speaking, Palino might be a bit behind maybe, but still has a solid economy, not the greatest science production, that might be a downside for him, but a very strong food production and a solid resource production. Martin has also a solid economy, has 1 more civil action than Palino. Eepogi has now, with having upgraded to scientific method, complete H2 economy ongoing, has the best resource production, which is certainly not bad, has only 6 civil actions but a lot of military actions, has the Meiji Castle to maybe make it more easily possible to defend himself, and Plunderteig will now lose a population, if he gets the Conmon, he will get a boost to his civil and military actions, has then the most civil actions, has the best science production, has to catch up a bit in culture, and his food production maybe not being the best for now. So I think so far it's relatively equal. I don't know the outcome of the game yet. Maybe let me make a prediction. I actually would say it's very close here. But let's maybe do a prediction. Maybe if I should continue doing those World Championship game reviews like that, maybe we can make it a little bit of a tradition that I do a guess at the beginning of H3 how the game will end. Yeah, it's hard to say. I think it's actually relatively close. And let's see, Martar has a very nice yellow bank that of course can be very important. The amount of population that you will be able to get. Palino should relatively easily be able to be very competitive in the strength. Has a bit of a culture lead. This weak science production might be a bit problematic, but he will maybe set up an opera soon, gets even more culture production. And Eepogi could have a bit of a population issue, probably will get the organized religion. It's a tough call. I will make one nonetheless, but I'm not at all convinced in what I'm saying. Let's say that Martar wins the game. Palino finishes second. Plunderteig third and Eepogi fourth. But I don't really know. I have no clue, to be honest. But let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see how right or wrong I am at the end. Alright, now it's Plunderteig's turn again, the first turn in H3. He seeds and opens the crime wave, which will not impact him. He goes for the railroad, takes the organized religion, which he also needs for himself, meaning that Eepogi actually doesn't get the organized religion, which is of course a bit of a setback for him. Might increase my chances to be at the right one, to be correct with my guesses. Plunderteig takes the railroad, which I think is an interesting decision. Doesn't go for the Conmon, yet maybe wants to give himself one chance to go into an H3 government form directly. And I think the railroad is interesting because with Newton having that many civil actions in science, he can easily get into oil, and then with the railroad that of course could give him a very, very big boost. Eepogi seeds and opens the Independence Declaration. Palino is weakest but doesn't have any colonies. Interestingly, he goes for the satellites for 3 civil actions. That makes him the strongest for now. Could be an indicator that there are some colonies coming. He has actually put the most events in there, half of them, and 2 are from Martar, 1 from Plunderteig. I think Palino has seeded very few events so far in this game. I'm not sure if even... I think he has seeded maybe 1 or 2. I'm not sure. Eepogi has a lot of event knowledge, and with him grabbing satellites for that expensive, could be a hint that there are some strong colonies coming. He then goes for his last upgrade, increases his population, is actually disbanding a warrior here, which is of course not ideal. At the moment he is still only the second weakest. Palino will now go for the opera. We'll go for a bit of a culture setup that of course can get heavily punished in 4-player games, but he has a good tactic to defend himself. Let's see if that will be enough, or if maybe one of the more economically focused players can just at some point overtake him with the military. He also takes some yellow cards here. He remains the weakest for now. Martar seeds, the freedom of movement is revealed. Martar uses it to put a philosophy into journalism. That of course is always a nice thing to do. And then he will take the civil service. Can't develop it this turn, but it will give him a nice boost soon. Also takes the military theory, has some blue text in hand, and then just takes the reserves. So he's actually just taking some cards. Could have maybe increased his population, set up 1 team sports, maybe instead of the reserves. So interesting that he is just taking some cards here, but of course the reserves, with maybe not having the most resources saved up, just a very important card for him. And yeah, I mean, he doesn't have the most resources. That can, of course, also at some point be a downside. Now, when we take a look at Plunderteig's and Eepogi's resources, maybe I was a bit too optimistic with predicting Martar as the winner. But I mean, he's the reigning world champion, and I need to have some trust in that. Alright, Plunderteig seeds and opens the historic territory. The first one of the colonies is coming that maybe could have seeded by Eepogi, and Eepogi, with having gone for the satellites, is also able to win that one, has to send an army away, but the happy phase is actually extremely helpful for him with having missed out on a happy phase solution. There's no H3 government form, so this turn Plunderteig is committing into the constitutional monarchy. There's also no oil on the row yet. He takes the rifleman, finishes the railroad, which helps him with the strength, takes the tanks, has now all the techs in hand to go for an H3 tactic, and then has now also his farms fully upgraded, meaning he has definitely a very strong economical setup and definitely a lot of potential. If he gets the military theory or maybe fundamentalism, can maybe go for a bit of a military push, but also could still find transitions into some peaceful ways to produce some culture. Eepogi goes for the cannons, builds one, builds another one, builds another one. Let's see if he will sacrifice his draws to copy the tactic. Yes, it makes him the strongest, so I think that does make sense. Then takes the modern infantry, the urban growth, and the efficient upgrade. Palino seeds and opens the prosperity, which will give him and Eepogi the most food. Plunderteig and Mortar only gain one food out of it. There are actually some extremely cheap government forms in the row for him, with having the Acropolis plus the Scientific Corporation, but sadly for him he doesn't have the most science available. He plays the Patriotism, builds a cannon, increases his population, takes the modern infantry, and Churchill. Churchill could be a good pick to help him defending his culture lead if needed. Also, he is the strongest for now. Mortar seeds, opens the inhabited territory. Mortar this time is able to win it for an army, so definitely a bit expensive. Now the reserves might help him to rebuild. Maybe he can also make a transition into a different tactic. Let's see. He will remain with the same tactic for now, has a very strong yellow bank, has the classic army actually, making him the second strongest, develops the civil service, takes Gandhi, takes the revolutionary idea, takes the democracy, takes the reserves, elects Gandhi, and then takes the engineering genius. So thanks to his many civil actions, he can now take quite a bunch of cards. And with the democracy, maybe wants to go for a bit of a greedy line. He has the statues, the democracy giving him even more culture production. And yeah, I mean, the second copy of military theory, it still has to be seen which player will get that one. Plunderteig has now the opportunity to take communism or fundamentalism, but those alone are not enough to go for a normal war over culture against Mortar. So far he might be somewhat safe. Only Eepogi could already go for war, but would need to do some build-up in beforehand. Plunderteig increases his population, builds a swordsman going up to 26 strength. He is going for the fundamentalism. Let's see if he develops it already or if it just wants to take it in hand as an option. It seems like he wants to take it in hand as an option. If he wants to go for some military to do a comeback, I think it could be a very important pick. It only costs him one civil action, so I think that makes sense. Also no oil on the row for him, so sadly there's no full railroad potential yet for him. Eepogi seeds and the arms industry is revealed, giving Mortar Pêcheur and Eepogi the most resources. Eepogi will increase his population, builds a cannon, builds another cannon. It looks like he wants to go for a bit of a military push. Also takes the space flight, which with having gone for some strong science production, could turn out to be quite a strong wonder for him. Palino this turn will cancel the Scientific Corporation pact. I mean, Mortar has lots of civil actions, has the revolutionary idea, probably was just too afraid. Now also Mortar is missing one science to get into the democracy, which could be a bit annoying for him. Palino goes for Churchill, builds a cannon, takes the fast food chains. Now the wonders that are left are those in the row, the Internet, United Nations, and the Red Cross. Takes the patriotism, still makes sure to be well equipped to defend himself. Also with Eepogi and Plunderteig doing some indications, giving some indications that they might want to go for a military push. Mortar will now seed, opens the Iconoclasm. That's of course a bit of a setback. Plunderteig losing Newton, who maybe at his next turn again could have saved him some civil actions. Eepogi losing Nobel. No Nobel Prizes this game, also maybe a bit of a setback for both Eepogi and Plunderteig, who were going for a bit more of a science dedicated strategy. Also the event deck has flipped again. We have 3 H2 events, 2 seeded by Mortar, 1 by Eepogi, and then 3 impacts, all seeded by all apart from Eepogi. Mortar goes for the United Nations, will get at least 16 culture out of it, probably not more, because getting all the urban building types will probably be a bit difficult for him. He builds an additional rifleman, maybe wants to be a bit safer from an aggression depending on how many defense cards he has. Plays the revolutionary idea, goes for the military theory. With doing that investment, he again won't be able to get into democracy peacefully at the next turn, but he can build some units, get stronger, be safe from aggressions and strength events while still getting 3 draws, and draws are also extremely important in H3. And at least he can maybe get into democracy in 2 turns. Plunderteig goes for air forces, is actually destroying a farm, copying the classic army tactic, going for the tanks, taking Marlene Dietrich, and it is definitely looking like he is trying something with the military. And I mean, he hasn't found some great ways to get a lot of culture production, and the gap in culture to Palino and Marta is getting bigger and bigger here. So let's see if he is actually able to pull a war off. I think the next turn might be the last chance for that. I don't think there will be 2 more opportunities, 2 more turns where he can declare war. Eepogi seeds and opens the refugees. Palino is the weakest, Plunderteig the strongest. Eepogi will go for movies, for the engineering, builds a movie, and then ends his turn. So he seems to not focus on any more aggressive strategy, rather just wants to get some culture with movies. Maybe the spaceflight can maybe go for Chaplain at the next turn for more culture production. Palino seeds and opens the Cold War, more science for Plunderteig and Eepogi. So even better that for Palino and Marta that Nobel was removed by the Iconoclasm. Palino will go for air forces, sees of course that Plunderteig did some investments into the military, will build an air force, takes the patriotism, is now the 2nd strongest. Marta takes the endowment, uses the engineering genius, actually finishes the United Nations. Now it will be interesting to see, has he a strong impact to evaluate that he then in the future can also put into the event deck? Actually not, so he maybe finished it in order to get the Red Cross going here, which of course might give him even more culture, and he is increasing his lead here. With this last civil action he will then develop the team sports, and he still needs a happy face solution, so that makes sense. Before his next turn he might lose it, and it's not for certain that he will get a copy of professional sports. Now let's take, there's of course something interesting happening, a hybrid war actually from Plunderteig against Eepogi. And I have to say, with how H3 has been going, and also with now seeing that war declaration especially, I'm actually quite happy about my guesses, because I don't think with the hybrid war, let's see how nicely Plunderteig, or if the culture that he might gain from that will be enough to actually catch up to Palino and Marta, who both will be getting more culture also with wonders. But Eepogi is now the target of the war, and I mean, I guessed him as last, Plunderteig as 2nd last, and then Palino and Marta. Marta is first, so it might actually work at the end. It was a bit of a random guess when I guessed it, but let's see if maybe it will actually turn out to be true. Plunderteig goes for the hybrid war. Of course, I can't talk in detail about the war decision. I would need to do some calculations and stuff. I don't have knowledge about the impacts that they have having. Maybe Plunderteig was actually not that confident that he could catch up to, for example, Palino. It could already be a sign of rather playing for something like 3rd place, potentially. Eepogi, I mean, he doesn't have any reserves in hand, has now some happy face issues, can go for 3 more cannons, so has the Meiji Castle. Palino, of course, has just a lot of resources saved up, has the patriotism, has the air forces. I guess Palino, with already having more strength, is just more threatening, and Marta has, of course, Gandhi. So, yeah, I guess maybe Eepogi could be the correct choice. Maybe not going for any war could also be an idea, but at the moment it's just not looking like Plunderteig can find anything to catch up in culture. So he is going for the war now, is going up to 75 strength, which is certainly quite strong. Thanks to Marlene, he has 2 armies with air forces. Eepogi seeds and opens the politics of strength, which will give Plunderteig some additional draws. Marta, depending on whether the age will have ended before his next turn, will either miss out on draws or lose 3 culture. Eepogi will now go for Chaplain. Of course, he is helping him now with the happy faces, and of course also gives him more culture reduction. He goes for the modern infantry. That could be a sign, of course, that he has something like entrenchments available. And he indeed has the entrenchments. Is at 51 strength, will still lose a bunch of culture. At the moment doesn't have enough resources to finish the space flight. Maybe he could be hoping towards a raid or a plunder or something. Palino Seeds opens the impact of Wonders. Let's see how well that one will be for everyone. It's good for Mortar and for Plunderteig. Palino this turn will finish the fast food chains. Goes for another religion. Actually doesn't take any cards from the row, giving Mortar the option to actually prolong the game by another turn if he thinks that it is beneficial for him. Maybe Palino's decision had also something to do with him being afraid of getting hit by something like a blunder and then maybe losing the resources that he needs to be able to finish the fast food chains. But if Mortar now doesn't NDH, I mean, it could also be a bit risky having now not that many resources left to defend himself. Maybe he thinks that Mortar, of course, could also be in danger. Plunderteig has no enough military actions to also go for a war against Mortar, and maybe with that Palino is hoping that Mortar will NDH, but it's maybe safe in the regard that he now has the fast food chains for certain, but with not knowing for certain whether the age will end, I mean, it's a bit risky in the regard of potentially being the target of a war. There is actually a peace treaty between Mortar and Plunderteig, and that could actually be very influential. Because now, if Mortar would have done anything else during its politics phase, then, as said, he also could now be target of a war, and maybe he would just end the age. But now I'm very interested to see if he will actually end the age, because now his maybe biggest contender, Palino, could get hit by a war from Plunderteig if he prolongs the game, and he, thanks to the peace treaty, is actually safe. And maybe also Plunderteig is using that as the reason to accept this pact, because with not accepting it, Mortar might just end the age, while now Mortar has actually a reason to maybe prolong the game. So I'm very interested to see how it will continue. It might not be a good sign for the prediction that I did, but definitely spicing things up a little bit here. Mortar takes the oil. It's of course the card from the discard spot, so that could already be a sign on his intentions. He is taking the air forces. Let's see if he will take any more card. He will increase his population, builds the team sports, finishes the Red Cross, plays the endowment for 2 culture, interestingly, and he is indeed not taking any more cards, is prolonging the game, and yeah, I mean, Plunderteig will now steal some culture from Eepogi. Let's see if he maybe will get a contender for Mortar actually, or if maybe Mortar can now just use that move, the peace treaty, to get rid of probably his biggest contender in this game, Palino. But let's see, maybe with getting another big war going, Plunderteig could maybe also be a contender for first place. Let's see how that will be going, and if Plunderteig even has another war. First of all, he will steal 27 culture from Eepogi. Eepogi is not willing to sacrifice any units for Himeji here. And there is now actually a war over culture. Palino is getting hit by that. Is now getting punished for his decision to finish the Wonder. Of course, maybe he could have not finished it and could have gotten hit by a blunder. But, I mean, it was a bit of a dangerous decision by him to just finish it. Maybe he wouldn't have been completely safe from a war regardless. And with that, maybe was willing or just was very convinced that the age will be ending. Now there will be a big war happening. And Plunderteig can do a revolution to fundamentalism, builds another knight, is at 86 strength now. Eepogi, at Eepogi's turn, H4 will start. And he will actually go for a blunder. So that's, of course, now very unfortunate for Palino. We can see that if he wouldn't have finished the Wonder, he indeed might have not been able to finish it at the last turn. But now he has gotten the points for the Wonder, but has going a very big war against him. Eepogi will go for another movie, takes the military build-up, the mechanized agriculture, and the oil. Palino Seeds and the impact of colonies is revealed. 3 for Plunderteig, Eepogi, and 6 for Mortar. Let's see how well Palino can defend with having gotten hit by the plunder. He is not able to... I guess he's just able to build another Air Force and another cannon with the resource from Churchill. Eepogi, of course, could somewhat dictate on how nicely Palino will be able to defend himself. He has stolen shamelessly. It's a bit funny that it's stated like that in the log. Shamelessly, he has stolen 5 resources and 2 food. And if he would have stolen a bit more, Palino would have been less good in a position to defend himself. Of course, for Eepogi, it's a bit of a question. Does he hope to maybe still finish before Plunderteig, maybe with being better prepared for impacts and getting the space flight? Or should he rather just play for 3rd place and hope that Palino will get hit that heavily by the war that he will finish behind him, in which case just taking all of the resources might have been better. But it seems like Eepogi at least wanted to make it that Palino still has the chance now to go for an Air Force and a cannon to go up to 57 strength. Now it's Marta's turn. He will play the reserves for food, goes for the democracy, builds a rifleman, builds a knight, destroys a farm, builds a team sports, takes the urban growth and a revolutionary idea. Now the last round is starting. Plunderteig will steal 34 culture from Palino. It's still somewhat close, so let's see which one of those players will actually finish before the other at the end. There will be another aggression. Plunderteig, making sure to keep Palino on distance, is now even more in front of him. But his impacts might not be the greatest ones. He is disbanding a knight, fixing his happiness a little bit, getting a bit of culture production going, and develops one more tech, increases his science production for impact of balance, and also his impact of architecture by a little bit. Eepogi seeds, the impact revealed is indeed the impact of happiness, so Plunderteig, still not a great impact for him, but at least he just fixed it in the right moment. A bit of luck maybe for him, but still of course a bit unlucky that the impact is in there, and the others catch now up quite a bit. Let's see, for the last round there are 2 events seeded by Eepogi, interestingly, so let's see what those might be. And then 3 by Palino and another one by Eepogi. So despite Plunderteig having gone for the big war and now also the aggression, because of maybe being better prepared for impacts, Palino might still finish before him. On the other hand, of course, if I'm seeing now just a production overview, with the defense, Palino is of course also not that well prepared for impacts any longer, but at least he has a bunch of them seeded by himself and knows what he needs to prepare for. Eepogi goes for the mechanized agriculture this turn. Him upgrading those is a big indicator that the impact of agriculture is in there, but maybe he also just couldn't do anything else. He doesn't have a free population, is actually willing to destroy a mine, doesn't hurt his impact of balance and harmony, so only the impact of industry is hurt by that. Finishes the space flight for 29 points. Palino seeds and opens the developed territory. Actually, no one wants to bid for that. Impact of colonies is already out, and yeah, no one sees any benefit in bidding for that one. Palino plays the reserves, increases his population, builds another religion. Let's see if is that any relevant for impact of culture. Not that much, so maybe just for the culture production. Could be an indicator that he doesn't have a specific impact that he can prepare nicely for. Marta opens another colony. That one, of course, is giving some culture, so now the players are willing to bid again, and Eepogi, with the satellites that he has taken at the beginning of Age 3, is willing to bid for that colony and sends a knight away, relatively cheap for him. He will now, of course, take the 7 culture, and let's see if that will have an impact at the end. Of course, it cost him also his impact of variety and competition a bit, but even if both of those impacts are in there, the colony still has given him more points. Marta goes for the oil, dispense a bunch of units. Maybe isn't that much. I'm not sure how many strengths did he had before that. I think he was weakest already anyway, so he doesn't want to play around impact of strength and instead dispense a bunch of stuff. Repairs his harmony, has now a harmony of 20. His impact of balance maybe as well. Agriculture with going for the additional farm. And now, it will be interesting. I don't know how the game has ended. Marta has a big lead. It seems like I might have at the end been correct with guessing that he might win the game at the end, but it's extremely close between all of the opponents. So I'm very interested to see which player will be on top at the end. And we see here that another impact has been seeded by Palino and then one by Martin, none by Plunderteig. That, of course, could be a big downside for him. But Palino, there are some impacts that are now quite bad for him. So now without talking about it even more, let's just take a look at how it ends. The first impact is the impact of industry. Eepogi has hurt that one a little bit with destroying that mine. It's the worst one for Palino, who is now behind. It's the best for Matar, who is probably too much in front anyway. There's the impact of competition. That one got improved by Eepogi. And now it's the best one for Plunderteig, with of course having gone for a bunch of war, but also for Palino. He is getting closer to Eepogi. Then there's indeed the impact of strength. So actually, some players are getting closer to Martin, and it's the best for Plunderteigs. So he is now in a good second position at the moment. Eepogi is in the last position. Then there's the impact of culture. That's a very bad one for Plunderteig. Palino and Eepogi are both getting closer, but Plunderteig has still a little bit of a lead with this impact of culture. I think now again it should be very certain that Martin will win that game. The second last impact is the impact of population, plus 12 Martin, plus 14 for Plunderteig, plus 16 for Palino, and only plus 8 for Eepogi. Of course, him winning that colony also cost him 2 points for the impact of population. He is now behind. Let's see if there will be some changes with the last impact. Between positions 2 and 4, there's still everything possible. And the last impact is the impact of agriculture that I think was seeded by Eepogi. He is catching up some points, but it is actually not enough for him. And at the end, we have Martin as the winner. Plunderteig finished at the second position. Palino, despite getting hit by that big war, is at the third position. And Eepogi, who of course also got hit by a war, is at the end at the last position. But yeah, it got very close here. And an extremely interesting ending. Because yeah, that peace treaty that got accepted really mixed up, I think, or really had quite an impact, a quite impactful peace treaty here, with Martin knowing that he won't be the target of a war, and with that seeing the benefits for him to prolong the game. And I think those benefits, with him now finishing with such a lead, have been, yeah, it probably has been the right decision by him. An unfortunate decision in course of actions, of course, for Palino, who at least at the end still managed to finish at the third position. And I mean, that peace treaty, Plunderteig, at a first look, it seemed weird why he's accepting it, but of course, only without it, the age might have ended, and only thanks to accepting that peace treaty, the age maybe continued, and that allowed Plunderteig to actually come back into the game, finish second, and yeah, make a bit of a comeback after it looked already like he might even be playing for third place with going for the hybrid war against Eepogi. Yeah, so quite an interesting finish. I'm happy about choosing that game, and yeah, I hope you also enjoyed that kind of video where I don't talk about a game of my own. Please leave me some feedback on if you prefer it the way how I did it right now, with not knowing what happens in the game. I think there were definitely some interesting surprises for me. I'm still somewhat happy about my guess. I guessed Martin as the winner correctly, Eepogi as the player who loses the game. Only between Plunderteig and Palino I needed a switch, so my guess turned out quite nice, but it was a bit of a random guess, so it could have also just gone quite wrong for me. Now, so leave me some feedback on if you prefer it like that, or if you would prefer it if I analyze the games beforehand, which of course would cost me a bit more time, so it might come at a cost of seeing less games in total. But of course, if you maybe want to do a bit more of a deep dive, that might still be preferable for you. And of course, if some of the players participating in this game watches the video, of course, I'm also interested in some feedback on some of the decisions and how things looked from their viewpoint. Alright, then we are at the end of the video. I think it's the first game of the group that has finished, so no need to take a look at the standings. Yeah, I hope it was an interesting video for you, and with that, thanks for watching and see you in the next video.